Hello everyone, hola a todos y todas. We're going to start in a few minutes as we let people in and go live on Facebook. Vamos a iniciar en unos minutos hasta que proyectemos en Facebook y termine de llegar la gente. As we wait for others to join, let me tell you that we have translation English-Spanish and Spanish-English. So please, everyone, pick the language of your choice in the little icon that you will see at the bottom of your screen. There's an icon of the world. You should pick your language there. Mientras esperamos que se conecten las demás personas y iniciar el webinar, les cuento que tenemos traducción simultánea en castellano, inglés, castellano. Así que les pedimos a las personas a todos que seleccionen su idioma de preferencia en el iconito del mundo que tienen en la parte de abajo de su pantalla, si pueden acceder a la traducción. Gracias. Okay, I think we can start now. As we go live. You can't hear us. So everybody needs to pick your language of choice. You see an icon below the screen with the word that says English, Spanish. You should choose your language. And can you hear us now, Federico? Let's try if the translation is working. Okay, thank you. Okay. So as we work out this issue with Federico, let me welcome everyone to our the first webinar of the Beyond Recovery campaign. GAIA is a global alliance of over 800 organizations in over 90 countries. And for 20 years, GAIA and our members have been working together for a just, waste-free world. My name is Cecilia Allen. I work with GAIA supporting global projects, and I am based in Argentina. And I'm going to say this again in Spanish in case someone is not getting the translation yet. And in the meantime, let me tell you, for those who just joined, that we have simultaneous translation English and Spanish. So we ask everybody to pick your language of choice. At the bottom of your screen, you will see a little word, an icon with a little word. So please choose your language of choice there. Bienvenidos a todos y todas a este seminario web, el primero de la campaña Más allá de la recuperación. GAIA es una alianza global de más de 800 organizaciones de más de 90 países y por 20 años GAIA y los miembros que la integran han estado trabajando por un mundo justo y libre de basura. Mi nombre es Cecilia Allen y trabajo en GAIA apoyando proyectos globales y estoy en Argentina. Tenemos traducción simultánea al castellano, así que les pedimos a todos y todas que por favor elijan el idioma español para acceder a la traducción si la necesitan. La van a encontrar en un iconito de un mundo que tienen abajo en su pantalla. Y ahora, bueno, voy a seguir en inglés. So thank you for joining GAIA and these incredible allied organizations and members presenting the connections between zero waste and jobs. This is a sneak preview of our new report that's coming up next week. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn so you can share the report and video next week on February 16, and more publications coming soon. Let me share a bit about the economic recovery campaign. The Beyond Recovery campaign, sorry. The COVID-19 crisis shows us that our systems are unjust and precarious, and we cannot simply go back to normal. We must move beyond recovery. We must seize the opportunity for transformative social, environmental, and economic change. Now is the time to build a more just and resilient global society. We believe zero waste is a way to achieve these transformations. Zero waste is not just about designing out waste and managing materials, but also it's about building social and environmentally just resource management systems. Today we are sharing new data that zero waste transformation benefits cities, from increasing social justice and environmental protection to job creation and cost savings for cities. As an alliance, we're coming together to urge governments to include zero waste city programs in national and local COVID recovery funds and priorities. And we also urge development organizations and other institutions to develop portfolios for zero waste initiatives. Before we dive in, a couple of points on logistics. First is that this session will last 1 hour. The second one is we ask you to please use the Q&A section on your screen on Zoom to put the questions you may have for the panelists at all times, and please don't use the chat box for that. The chat box will be used for any technical inconvenience you might have and to contact with the support team. For those of you who haven't chosen your translation setting, please do so you can hear also the Spanish-speaking people. And the last thing is that today's session is going to be a talk show style discussion. And joining us today are Alicia Montoya with the Federación Argentina de Cartoneros, Carreros y Recicladores, or FACCyR, from Buenos Aires, Argentina. Matteo Colombi from Teamsters, from Washington, D.C., United States. And Tangri from GAIA. He's the co-author of the Zero Waste and Jobs report we are presenting today. So thank you, the three panelists, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to really have you with us today and sharing your expertise. And let's start with Alicia. Let's start with getting to know you, Alicia. Please tell us about the FACCyR, who are their members, and what is your role in there? You are muted, Alicia.
¿Qué tal? Buenas tardes a todos. Bueno, yo soy Alicia de la Federación de Cartoneros, Carreros y Recicladores de la República Argentina. Soy una militante social dentro de la Federación y mi organización de base es la cooperativa de trabajadores El Álamo, además de coordinar el trabajo de cooperativas en la provincia de Mendoza. La Federación es una organización que nuclea alrededor de 25.000 trabajadores de base, de unos 200.000 aproximadamente que existen en la Argentina, y que busca a través de la organización de los trabajadores su reconocimiento dentro de programas de gestión integral de residuos en municipios, provincias, e inclusive ahora trabajando en un programa nacional de reciclaje inclusivo. Bueno, tal vez la mejor manera de definir la Federación es una organización de trabajo y de lucha, porque en los países de América Latina no hay ninguna posibilidad de que los derechos se obtengan sin organización y sin lucha, lo que no significa que estemos todo el día haciendo ruido, pero debemos hacer bastante ruido para que esta inclusión se lleve adelante. Es un gusto estar en contacto con GAIA. Cecilia ha sido en nuestro país una de las que acompañó el proceso de organización incipiente. A Neil la última vez que lo vi fue en Colombia, en Bogotá, ya hace muchos años. Ya estamos todos un poco distintos, pero bueno, me alegra de que sigamos todos comprometidos en esta tarea que es cuidar la casa común, ¿sí? Así que gracias y un gusto de nuevo.
Thank you, Alicia. The pleasure is ours. So we can say with its ups and downs that Buenos Aires City has a zero waste system. So I want to ask you, Alicia, how did the movement and the city ensure that the informal recycler cooperatives were included in the citywide zero waste system?
Bueno, esto creo que tiene muchísima actualidad, sobre todo en tiempos de pandemia. Lo de organización y lucha que planteaba como federación, particularmente a escala de la ciudad, creo que tiene que ver no solo con una visión de lucha en un sentido clásico, sino lucha en despertar conciencias, en articular. A mí me causa hoy a veces sorpresa cuando veo los niveles de acompañamiento de la sociedad. Yo creo que es el trabajo territorial sobre el que se construye cualquier programa de transformación social, económico, ambiental. Si no existe ese trabajo territorial, se pueden dar pequeños avances. Y el programa de basura cero en la ciudad siempre estamos en una constante pelea con el gobierno para que garantice los recursos, para que haga esto y aquello, y creo que más allá de lo que este o cualquier otro gobierno quiera, nuestra batalla está ganada en el terreno de la ciudadanía. La ciudadanía reconoce la necesidad de este trabajo, reconoce la labor de los recuperadores, y eso no es un milagro o la obra de una persona, sino es la permanencia, la acumulación y la articulación permanente. Desde un lugar donde se reúnan jubilados hasta una organización religiosa, la escuela, los lugares donde la ciudadanía participa de manera colectiva, nos parece que ese es el lugar desde donde se pueden sostener los programas y son los que le dan perspectiva de largo plazo. Me parece que no hay otra receta más que esa.
Thank you, Alicia. And let's go to you, Matteo, now. Please tell us about the Waste and Recycling Division of the Teamsters Union and who your members are.
Sure. Hello, I'm Matteo Colombi. So first of all, the Teamsters Union is a large union with 1.4 million members. And we organize workers in all kinds of sectors. As you can see, our logo, I don't know if you can see it, is a very old logo. It's two horses because the union started by workers that were hauling materials in cities. So that could be milk, it could be construction materials, but also waste hauling. Today, we have many divisions. One of them is the solid waste and recycling division. And we represent about 30,000 workers across the United States. Most of waste work in America that used to be done by public sector has been privatized. There are giant corporations that cover many states, some of them owned by major billionaires like Bill Gates. And the conditions of work are very bad unless we're able to win a solid, good union contract. That's who we represent. It's a constant struggle. There are very high injury rates and death rates on the job. And we're very interested in developing a system that's zero waste and zero exploitation. Out from where we are now, recycling rates are extremely low in the United States of America. It's a mainly landfill-centric and then incineration-centric system in terms of where the waste goes. That's not where the population wants to go. There's a lot of cities interested, and a few of them have made major strides. One of them would be San Francisco, where we have had a good experience promoting community interest, the workers' interest, and the city's interest in shifting away from throwing stuff in the ground or burning it and getting it back into each and everyone's lungs. So.
Thank you. And following up on that, as you mentioned, San Francisco is one of the cities that is trying to do better and has a zero waste system. So has this created new jobs for the system, for the recycling and zero waste system?
You know, it would be great. We would have liked to have somebody here from San Francisco. I'm out of DC and kind of help follow across the country. We know for sure that taking trash and just burning it creates a lot less jobs than you know, recovery, a plan for zero waste, where you take food out and you compost it, where you actually deal with recyclables, where you try to do remanufacturing, so on and so forth. In the San Francisco case, our experience is that a supportive public policy framework enabled the creation of a system that recovers a lot more material than the average United States. We're able to have very solid labor contract. There is a local hire provision from communities that are directly impacted. And there's a lot of food that would become methane and go in the sky, aggravating climate change, and instead gets turned into soil and back into the agricultural and uses, which is such an important thing. And like I said, there are attempts across the country in some cities to get started down that path. Some cities are further along, and we support it. I want to remark that for us as a labor union, it's important to have more jobs. That's economic development, but the quality of jobs is very important. That communities and workers have rights they can enforce, so that that it's not just the quantity of what happens, but the quality, and that applies, of course, to the environmental parameters as well.
Thank you. And so in your perspective, or in the union's perspective, how can you make sure that workers are protected? And also, what is your vision as a union in terms of zero waste?
Right. So first of all, you know, there's this talk of just transition going around. And it's important that we create a framework that takes care of people who might be displaced, like when we shut down incinerators or we shift away from landfills. But very important is that there are labor rights, but they need to be enforced. And so cities, when they build out, and states and federal government, when they deploy resources, because we need investment in a zero waste infrastructure. And we cannot just invest in the technical aspect of it. We also need to invest in the communities and workers, and basically ensure that the rights that are on paper are enforced. And if there are bad corporate players, that they're pushed out, whether they're a bad corporate player on the environment. You know, we shouldn't be choosing between environmental goods and social goods. They have to come together. But and right now we have an opportunity as our societies turn to focus on climate change, that we don't treat waste as an afterthought. You know, even the word waste is kind of mentally, at least in our culture, is like something that you stop caring about, and instead it needs to be a strategic focus on it. It's a key strategy to get carbon out of the air and bring it back into the soil, composting, but it's also a key strategy to lift up hundreds of thousands of people who do this work every day and need a better social contract. And then, of course, the communities are most directly impacted by the waste, where the transfer stations are. But even if you set up composting facilities, I mean, we need to give thought. And I always say, I like adjectives, but I like contracts better. So, you know, you set rights, you create contracts, you can institutions that can enforce them, and you worry about how to create the infrastructure that can support it, the physical and the policy kind of framework. And I think it's it's a must, and it's an opportunity for us, for all of us, really.
Thank you very much. And Neil, going to you, welcome first. And you're the co-author of the report, which is called Zero Waste and Economic Recovery, the Job Creation Potential of Zero Waste Solutions. Please describe your approach to a global research, taking into consideration that this is such a local topic, waste is such a local topic.
Yeah, clearly the way waste is handled varies a lot from place to place. So what we did was we undertook a meta-analysis. So we literally found every single academic paper, report, publication that we could on this topic. We read through all of them, we analyzed each one, and they were remarkably consistent in their results that disposal, landfilling and incineration create very few jobs. Composting creates 3 times more jobs. Recycling creates 4 times more jobs than disposal. And that was true everywhere you looked in the world.
So thank you. Can you tell us a little bit more of the main highlights of the report?
So I was actually really surprised by how many jobs zero waste can create. We're talking thousands of jobs. We analyzed Dakar, Durban, London. We could get more than 4,000 new jobs in each of those cities. In Dar es Salaam, we could get something like 18,000 new jobs, and in Sao Paulo, 36,000 new jobs. So that's a huge number of jobs. And these are not only jobs handling recyclables, they're really varied jobs. There's jobs in manufacturing, in farming, in community outreach, because a big part of zero waste systems is, what Matteo was talking about, getting ordinary householders to cooperate in source separation. There's electronics and furniture repair. There's drivers, equipment operators, managers. They're really varied jobs. They also pay well. The data on pay is less, there's less of it than in terms of the number of jobs, but where we found information, the jobs pay better than minimum wage. In some places, like San Francisco, they pay better than the average wage. So these are well-paid for sort of varied jobs. And I think, as Matteo was saying, there's perfect alignment between doing the best thing for the environment and creating the most jobs and the most economic activity. There's no conflict between the two, really. The steps that we need to take to create jobs are exactly the same ones that we would create for good environmental outcomes.
Thank you, Neil. Before we move on, I want to remind everyone that you can post any questions you might have for the panelists in the Q&A section, so feel free to write your questions there at any time. So moving forward, Alicia, how do you think governments can work with cooperatives and people who are doing an essential, providing an essential service like recycling?
In fact, how they should do it well. We say you can only work seriously on recycling if the state participates. There's no possibility of moving forward with recycling without exploitation and with a due recognition of labor and social rights and caring for the environment if the state does not participate. So we believe that any community, any co-op, or a community alone, or an organization that wants to promote recycling, of course, there are main sectors in this chain, and any plan, whether it's small, medium, or big, must be sent to the government, to the state, so that they turn it into a permanent public policy. Otherwise, we will have what happens in some Latin American countries, where you go on the web pages and see a lot of programs and very beautiful things, beautiful pictures. But when you go to the cities and you ask any recycler that is still pulling along a cart full of whatever he or she was able to collect in the street. They're not aware of the program and the possibility of massifying zero waste programs calls for the community's commitment, for an organization of workers, and we need a legal and political structure in our governments, or else, I mean, there are many efforts across our planet, but all the international reports say that the common home degrades, deteriorates day after day in an accelerated manner. So we have to see how all that goodwill is brought together to organize at the state level, municipal, provincial, and national programs. For us, that's the only way about it. In Buenos Aires City, we started with a zero waste program promoted by an environmental organization. Then we brought in the workers' organizations. It was at an incipient level at that time. And look how strange this has been. We had a law in place, and based on that law, we were then able to work on other pieces of legislation allowing specific programs under state agreements. So in each place, there will be different paths forward, but if the legal and political superstructure does not support and place this on the political agenda, these will just remain in efforts, but not turn into actions.
Thanks, Alicia. Matteo, I saw you nodding when Alicia was talking about the role of the government in making sure that, workers' rights are respected and the zero waste systems actually work. So I want to get your vision on this, and also how or what do you want governments to do in terms of connecting jobs but also climate and sustainability under the same umbrella?
Yeah, I guess I was saying that before, and maybe one way to think about this is the system level problems need system level approach. And what's good about or interesting about waste is that it's at once is a very local issue. So local government can play a big role, but it is also about supply chains, how materials are produced and whether they are recyclable or not. And then linking sectors. It's almost like it's a moment in a geography, but then it links up to, like if you had to take food out and compost it to keep it out from the air and also to return nutrients back to the soil. So you need policy that links up with the agricultural sector that needs to use it. We see lots of e-commerce now and lots of cardboard boxes. And there's actually almost like a need for more boxes, but where do they come from? There's no clear way to link up and even force the providers of e-commerce to pay some fee so that you can finance the infrastructure for recovering and returning that to cycle. And then, as we know, there's a lot of things that are not truly recyclable. There's a lot of plastic, I hear, and I'm being educated. And we start with a system that has certain biases right now in the policy framework, sometimes even subsidies. And so we need to shift that. And I think people don't fully appreciate how much, of course, this is not just about climate, but the climate piece is a very important piece because 40% of the waste stream is food. And if food is commingled with everything else, it's hard to recycle the other materials. But that 40% of food is mostly carbon. And right now in America, most of that does not end up back into the soil. It's going to end up mixed with toxic things and things you can't recycle into landfills. Because of the way landfills are set up, it will mostly end up as methane into the air, which is 30 times more heat forcing than carbon, or you get it inside an incinerator together commingled with everything else. And then that creates, of course, its own problems. And again, you're getting emissions and the commingling of what could be life-giving soil with burning plastics and other materials. Last thing that I think is on the horizon is all the not on the horizon, we've been dealing with e-waste, but now that electric vehicles really get started, we're going to have the issue that needs to be managed up front rather than waiting before it's a nightmare of electric vehicle batteries. And so that's what I mean, is like you need government to really, we need to call government to intervene at the local level, but also at whatever state or federal level you have. And then environmental movement needs to think, when you're thinking about resources and portfolio of resources, we hear a lot about green technology. Well, we need to think about waste from that perspective as well. You need new investment in building a new system. And never forget that you can't do it while ignoring the condition of workers and the communities, that's why I really love what I'm hearing from Alicia. Of course, for us as a labor union, it makes perfect sense. I hope that's, I don't want to repeat myself. But, and so if you see there's attempts at doing pilot programs, that's okay to understand something, maybe to wrap your mind around it, but that's not what the solution is going to look like. You need systems.
Definitely, thank you. And thinking about the current context in which we are, with the pandemic, the COVID, I'm wondering, Neil, if you see any opportunities for cities to seize in this unique moment.
Yeah, this is a terrible moment, but we can look for silver linings. I think everywhere in the world, people are focused on economic recovery, and to most of us, that means job creation. So, our study indicates that the repair, reuse, refill systems are the ones that create the most jobs. And so cities can incentivize those small grants to help zero waste businesses get off the ground, streamline permitting, directing their own expenditures as the city to local zero waste businesses. I think that's probably the easiest and quickest thing to do. Banning single-use plastics and other disposables and charging businesses for waste disposal, which doesn't happen everywhere. That helps level the playing field also for zero waste businesses. But I think it's also really important not to stop there. Government should use this opportunity to build comprehensive, inclusive zero waste systems, including tackling organics, the hard to recycle materials like Matteo was talking about with electronics, car batteries. We certainly need national level systems for collecting and recycling lithium-ion batteries that are in everything from mobile phones to cars. And so there's roles for local government, sort of state or provincial level government, national governments. And we need to do all of that to really maximize the environmental benefits and the job creation potential of zero waste.
Thank you. And I want to extend the question to Alicia and Matteo. Alicia, with this, as Neil mentioned, this terrible time, do you think there is still a moment to push for waste pickers' agenda maybe with local governments or national governments?
Sí, de hecho aquí en la Argentina.
Yes, in fact, here in Argentina, we are promoting it from our federation with the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Social Development that have helped to promote national programs. This means resources to move forward in inclusive recycling programs in different places across the country. There's something related to this question and that I believe is very important to mention. When I heard Matteo explain the logo of the two horses here in Argentina and in the outskirts of Buenos Aires city, that where they wish to look like New York, London, we have workers recovering material on horses or using horses. And in the country, many cases. When there are economic crises, the workers try and create employment, and material recovery has been one of the ways in which our men and women have found a way about in the different crises that others created, but that they have to put up with. They've gone out to collect material, and I say that if somebody collects plastics, it's because somebody buys it, and if somebody buys it, it's because somebody needs it elsewhere. So the pandemic has really disclosed all this, and what each one of us in the small or big organizations have been saying for a long time has now been seen by the world. We can't go on like this. All that we thought was screaming in a desert, the pandemic has really put this at the forefront. When men and women stayed at home, nature started blossoming, the rivers cleaned up. I mean, nature told us, you are the predators and you are degrading all this. And this has brought about concerns in many sectors that you can see in the social networks of the different organizations. I believe that no doubt in the city we've seen this, there's a new opportunity for jobs because men and women who were left jobless, just like in our 2001 crisis, they have shown up on the streets. But I wouldn't leave it at that. I think that the pandemic and COVID have put on the table the possibility of discussing something that is systemic. It's not generating jobs to meet the needs of the economic crisis. What our lifestyle is asking from humanity is that it changes this perverse system in which we live with indiscriminate consumption, use of things that should no longer be used because they pollute. And the workers, and I say the recyclers as well as those that collect damp or special waste or wet waste, or they have the opportunity of strongly demanding, not asking the state, that they reverse the systems that are really doing away with humankind. I would suggest reading one of Pope Francis' encyclicals, where he very simply explains all these things. It dates back to May 2015. He explains it for the vulnerable populations, where he says that the common house is endangered. And he talks about the communities, environmental movements, but he urges all of the international politicians and national states to review this technocratic system. That means that it works with more polluting devices that are destroying our lives. I think this is an excellent point in time to go towards whatever is systemic. It's not only jobs, it's not only grassroots recyclers or the affected communities. It's a system that lives from the land, and then the animals that live there, men and women that live there. It's a system that is screaming to put an end to this, screaming for help, and this is an opportunity.
Definitely. Thanks, Alicia. We are indeed in an inflection point, and there's still a long way to go until that change is brought about, right? I think we're still in the middle of the discussion of whether change is going to happen but there's definitely still possibilities for that. So I fully agree with what you're saying. Before we dive into the questions, Matteo, do you have any thoughts regarding whether this moment provides any opportunity to push our agenda and for local governments to do, to protect workers and bring about systemic change?
So first of all, I just want to say Alicia's words were beautiful and true. We as Teamsters have had a number of strikes during the COVID crisis. Work is intense, it's not slowed down. In fact, there's a lot of waste, maybe more waste from households because of people being at home and how consumption is happening. And there's still community organizing and mayors getting elected and people and cities grappling with what to do. I want to be optimistic, but it's going to be a big challenge. I think right now, at least in the United States, the emphasis is on returning as quickly to the world as it was. I think that we will discover that it will not be so easy. And so in that sense, yes, there is opportunity. But you know, we persist in our struggles. And that's why we like to participate beyond just talking with our members and the people we want to organize. I just want you to know that in the last 12 months, there were strikes because of COVID. And so workers are still looking for justice and not just jobs, even though a lot of people have lost their jobs. And we're still active on reform of the waste.
En reformar el sistema de residuos, y hay gente que está trabajando.
Thing to do in the United States. There's a lot of repression at the hands of very powerful companies. So I think part of what's happening is companies are trying to co-opt. This is not new, but co-opt the idea of social responsibility, escalating environmental crises. I think the time for pretending is over, and we as a society will discover that. But I don't think we've turned the corner. Of course, and it's normal and understandable that people would. I want to go to my former life. I understand that, but the truth is that we need change. Change is happening anyhow. Can we use this situation to turn it into positive change rather than a further attack on workers' rights, a further attack on the environment, and just some nice words on top on a TV commercial. So I think people are testing in their own life the reality of environmental dissipation, destruction, of economic dislocation. And I think out of that, we may be able to have deeper conversations and deeper interventions. That's my optimistic side. I'm going to leave it there. That's my wish.
Yeah, let's leave with that. Thank you. So thanks to the three panelists for these insights and thoughts. We're going to move to the people's questions, to the audience questions. We have one for Neil, which is, did you find any relation between zero waste, the development of local markets, and jobs creation?
So this is not a question that we were able to really address very clearly. You know, as you all know, materials flow internationally these days, whether it's cardboard or paper or steel or plastic, whatever. But we do find that, you know, cities are major consumers of these materials. And when cities also become producers of them because they're pulled out of the recycling system, that creates the possibility for an entirely local ecosystem, if you will. So you're creating jobs at the recycling end, you're creating jobs in the manufacturing, and then you're creating jobs selling those same products. So it reduces our need to be dependent on distant markets, either for raw materials or to sell our products. So quantifying that has been difficult, but I think that there is a strong argument to be made that when you recycle materials instead of wasting them, then you are actually helping to close the loop. You reduce the need for transportation. You're creating a kind of a stronger local economy that's less subject to the vagaries of kind of international commodity markets and all of those things.
Thank you for that. We have another question related to something I was mentioned before. It says, the question is about recycling companies. And it says in Chile, recycling has become a business, a profitable business. So there are economical, powerful groups that are, put a bin and for people to put the waste in there. People put them and these big containers on the streets, and that doesn't take into account waste pickers. So the question is, how do we implement zero waste when these conflicts of interests exist between recycling companies, municipalities, and waste pickers? I don't know, Alicia, if you want to answer that.
Bueno, ahí le aprovecho para decirle a Matteo que ahí
I'd like to tell Matteo that in Chile is an example of how contradictory things are, because they have an environmental policy, but Chile, that was the major Latin American model of economic development. The bomb exploded. Millions of men and women took to the streets and are fighting today to have a change in the system. But on the other hand, Chile sort of made out that it dealt with recycling. So they passed the extended farmers' responsibility law that promotes the Chilean model, which is the self-employment. Me alone fighting in a market. We were telling our Chilean brothers and sisters at the time that the independent work without organization for the workers would enable the business for the big players. So Chile should try to work in the field of public policies so that in such and such municipality that law be adapted to include inclusive recycling, i.e. that companies have to pay for the products they put on the market and pay a fee, and that fee be managed by the government to create genuine employment, including the historical workers of the sector. There's no other way in Chile. I'm very sure of that. And I trust that the social movement that started not only will help this, but other things too, because Chile is a country that is very much affected in environmental terms. This discussion, we had it about 5 or 6 years ago, if we existed or not, and I said the entrepreneurship, self-employment, words that sounded opposite to workers that are aware that the market alone in the market with the current system, market eats you up. You have to move forward hand in hand. Workers being hand in hand is the only way to gain improvement. If it's not that, no other possibility.
Thanks, and I think this is an important remark considering all the initiatives taken by big companies, to, as you said, like entrepreneurs collecting materials, plastics for these mega corporations with no connection to the government, with no rights for workers, but done individually. So I think it's a very pertinent comment. We have a few more questions. One is actually a comment reaffirming what Alicia was saying. It says the waste pickers have demonstrated that they are essential workers. They have demonstrated that during the pandemic. They need to be recognized as such, and this has implications in terms of their inclusion and payment of their activity, and why not having also access to vaccination as in a priority way. So thank you, Federico, for that comment. Definitely true. And I'm going to read. There's another question. It's a bit connected more to waste management in general, which is what shall we do with things like mattresses, like bulky waste and construction and demolition waste, electronic waste. If anyone wants to provide any reference for that, that's one of the other questions.
Yeah, you know, sorry, it's ironic because a lot of this bulky, hard to recycle waste is actually the things that have the most value. And we have created a society where we are throwing that away, and we are throwing away all of the kind of the resources and the labor that went into creating those things. So the irony is that that is precisely where the greatest opportunity lies. For every so repairing things, returning items to service creates 200 times as many jobs as simply disposing of them. So creating repair businesses, repair opportunities for things like mattresses and furniture and electronics and you know, all the other kind of bulky items is actually something that would extract the most value from the materials, and it would create a huge number of jobs. And that requires, it does require coordination with the authorities, right? Because somebody has to collect that stuff and not take it to the landfill, collect it in a way that it doesn't get mixed and damaged, you know, further damaged. And then there's often some legal challenges as well, that, you know, if you're going to reuse cushions or mattresses, here in California, there are requirements about how much virgin fiber has to be in there. So there are some sort of regulatory hurdles that need to be overcome. But I think primarily it's getting a municipal authority to look at the totality of the waste stream and say, how do we extract the most value out of it? Both the most environmental value as well as the most social value. And certainly repairing items is a big part of that. Now, it's also true that most stuff is not built to be repaired. So there is a big design question that we need to go after, so that whether it's electronics or anything else, that is being designed and built from the beginning so that it can be disassembled and repaired. And there's a whole right to repair movement now that's taking off. There was a great article recently about repair cafes in France, where people bring stuff and neighbors kind of share their skills and create, you know, and fix things so that you don't have to go out and buy something new every time. And that can be a significant source of employment as well. It does require national level legislation putting pressure on companies to ensure not only that there's a legal right to repair items, but that the products are being designed for reparability. And so France is pioneering this system of a repair score, and things that are not easily reparable, I think, are subject to higher taxes than those that are reparable. So there are sort of opportunities for policy interventions around that, and there's opportunities for entrepreneurship, and of course there's opportunities for organizing and for labor organizing as those jobs come up.
Sorry, thanks, Neil. I would also add that in many countries, the repair systems still survive as a thing that is very usual. So it's as equal as promoting. It's also making sure that wherever they are, they survive, they keep happening, right? So we have one more question for Alicia, and we have 5 minutes, so I'm going to ask you to be brief, which is if you can describe a little bit about the Buenos Aires system. How does it work? Do you collect door to door? How many people work, the cooperatives, etc.? Very briefly, you can.
Sí, sí, es un sistema
It is a multiple system. Everything related to home waste or residential waste that is collected by door-to-door waste collectors. They can also move their recyclables to what they call the green points that you'll find on squares and that. And this is moved in trucks that cooperatives operate, and they move them to the green centers where they're treated, compacted, etc., to then include them in the recycling industry. In the city is 7,000 workers in 12 cooperatives, and they manage different areas of the city of Buenos Aires. And they have a total budget where there is a contribution made by government to the workers' income, which is not very significant today, but that helps, especially within the framework of the pandemic.
Thank you, Alicia. We have 3 minutes left, and I see one more question in the chat. It says, are your organizations demanding investors to divest from wasteful plastic and oil and gas and invest instead in creating good-paying jobs for the most impacted Black, Indigenous, people of color, and low-income people in deep repair, reuse, recycling, and clean energy industry? I would say yes, but if anybody wants to add any thought, that's precisely what we're trying to do, is highlight the potential of creating new jobs, and I think, as Matteo was saying, good quality jobs as part of zero waste systems. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to this question. No.
I don't know all the full details. I know we've taken on sometimes the shareholders of companies that we deal with, and you know, we at times weigh in on, especially on policy side of the state and local government. I'm not aware that we've done kind of a divestment. Usually we don't. That's not the type of thing that our union gets involved in. But I would have to look more into it.
Thanks. Any addition?
Sí, quisiera decir en relación a
Yes, with regard to this, I would like to say that creating more good jobs. What's a good job in France, or what would be a good job in Africa? What would be a good job in Argentina? I found a formula that I always mention. A good job is always one that is not below the average salary of all workers in the country, because that is the maximum that the organized workers have been able to achieve. I believe this is important. In every country, this is different, of course. And the recycling, reuse, composting, no doubt generate excellent jobs because they have many benefits that have a direct impact on the workers' economy. I always say that someday we should find someone wishing to collect all there is on how workers make something work that on the market does not work because companies create them so that they break and that they can sell another one. So that, of course, has an impact on the economies and the communities. So I think there are many opportunities. And I'm really very glad that GAIA has addressed this topic, because this is a discussion that is taking place in our countries, and we must all harness this path we are walking along.
Thank you, Alicia, for that. And we are at time, actually past time. So I want to thank you, Alicia, Matteo, and Neil, for sharing your expertise today. I hope people in the audience have, have new tools and feel more inspired to push for zero waste as part of building a more just and resilient global society and bringing about systemic change. We hope you can share the recording of the session from today. It will be posted on GAIA's website, on Facebook, and on YouTube. And as I mentioned, the report is going to be published next week on the 16th. So we encourage you to think about who you can share it with, maybe a local government or anyone who may be interested and excited for the opportunity of creating new jobs through zero waste. And finally, remember to follow GAIA on social media to continue to learn and connect with others in this movement. We are GAIA Global on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And with that, I thank you again, everyone, for joining, and hope to see you soon.